number of reasons. I heard someone say the other day that purple represents the bruises that may be inflicted during a physical assault of someone who's experiencing domestic violence. But we also know that purple represents royalty and freedom and independence. So we're going to move from this one area and we're going to slide over here into the royalty space, because that makes us feel better about what's coming after. Once again, thank you all for being here. My name is DeWanna Hamlin. I'm the director of Bridges to Hope Family Justice Center. It is a new county department in Forsyth County. We are located at 725 North Highland Avenue on the Health and Human Services campus, and we offer services in one location at no cost for people who experience domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, child maltreatment, and human trafficking. So we appreciate the county's vision in helping us bring this to reality after some years of planning. Before we start today, we want to establish just a few guidelines. So we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm going to have Miss Yolanda Bolden welcome you as well. She has, I'm sure, some introductory comments, and then we'll go back to our program. Miss Bolden. Thank you. Miss Bolden, would you like the microphone?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You all hear me? So thank you all again for coming. On behalf of Forsyth County Public Library, I'd like to welcome you all here. If you haven't been to this space, welcome. We'd love to have you back to tour. But most importantly, we were so thankful for Ms. Hamlin to reach out to us for this collaboration. Of course, she has done an excellent job all month, and of course all year, especially this month, providing information to educate others about domestic violence. And we appreciate this opportunity to collaborate with you, and of course feature our author, Mrs. Shine. So I know that what you have today will inspire many to go to, seek assistance for resources. And again, we thank you for you all coming out today.
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. So before we start, we want to make sure that we establish what we call a safe space for those of us who do the work. And we know that emotional, physical, psychological safety is important for everyone, because we're going to be talking about some information that may tug at all of us in different ways. We also want to make sure that we're practicing privacy and confidentiality. This is a public event. It's not a support group, but we want to be careful about disclosing information that may be considered personal or private. This event is being live streamed, so that's another reason for us to make sure that as we're talking about our lived experiences and the lived experiences of others, that we do that in a way that is respectful. We want to proceed with caution. If you are currently experiencing any type of interpersonal violence, or you have a history of interpersonal violence, we know that these conversations can be difficult, and they may tug at us and pull us. When we think we're in our healing space, we may realize when we hear certain words or certain phrases that we're not quite there yet. So just be aware of that. And if you need some extra support, there's some folks here that will wrap their arms around you in love and let you know what resources are available. In fact, we have a resource table here in the back from our Family Justice Center, so if you need those materials, know that they're there. We also want to respect Ms. Shine's story and honor her lived experiences, whether we agree or not. We don't want to get into a debate about what's happened, about what different systems did or didn't do. Our role here is to support Ms. Shine as she tells her story today, and also making sure that we do operate not in a sense of judgment or criticism, but just support each other today. And that's all that I have. The words of importance are there with our guidelines. If we need to refer back to them today, then we will. I also want to recognize, before I forget, we do have a staff member who volunteered to be here today from Bridges to Hope Family Justice Center. Wave your hand, Ms. Warren, so people know who you are. Thank you for being here. She works hard every day to make sure that clients get what they need at Bridges to Hope. And we also have members of Ms. Shine's family here today. and you will have an opportunity to connect with them as we move through the program. So, Ms. Shine, I'm going to ask, are you ready for liftoff?
I am.
All right, let's get down to it. So, Ms. Shine, I want to say thank you for being here today, and I want our audience to know that you have willingly made a decision of your own free will to be here to speak about your experiences. There aren't any conflicts of interest or incentives from Forsyth County and your organization, and that you're in a good place in your healing journey to be able to speak about that. Is that all correct?
Absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. I do want to mention, because we have children in the room, that we will be speaking very directly about this issue. It has been in the closet for a long time, and if we are unable to speak about these things in an informed way, then it continues to stay behind closed doors. However, we also want to make sure that we do remember there are children in the room, okay? So let's get down to our first question. So, Ms. Shine, you lost a sister to domestic violence homicide, and she was killed by someone who claimed to love her. And that's a lot just to take in right there, for sure. But let me ask you, what inspired you to write a book about this experience that must have been difficult for you?
I'm gonna grab the mic.
Okay,
Is it on? Push it up.
there we go.
Okay. First of all, I want to say I am honored to be here today. This is such a great privilege to get the word out about domestic violence and the silence of domestic violence. But to answer DeWanna's question, I did not originally set out to write a book. During my sister's death, we were 22 months apart, and we were foster kids. We were 2 of 8 siblings, and we ended up growing up together. So losing her was a very difficult process for me. She was almost like my twin sister when it happened. And if anyone in here has ever dealt with a tragic death, so you know how difficult that is. So to deal with her tragedy, I started writing about her experience through her voice in first person on social media. And when that happened, so many women had came out and started to speak about their experience with domestic violence. And so I was just in awe to see that. But what inspired me was the women coming out saying, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And never in my wildest dream would I think I would want to write a book or know how to write a book. And so it was 5 years later when I decided to write the book. But that's what inspired me. And also what inspired me to write the book is so many people were resonating with Cheryl's voice. So I thought it was very important to get her voice out there. They wanted to hear more. Also, this was a way of leaving my sister in remembrance, because there were several things I had promised her once upon her death that I would do. So her death would not be in vain. So that's what inspired me to write the book.
Thank you. You know, it's really interesting. Once you start talking about this issue, it is a common experience for women and men. About 1 in 3 women experience intimate partner violence, about 1 in 10 men. An average of 3 women are killed every day in our country as a result of domestic violence homicide. So once you start opening that door just a little crack, people start to share their story. In fact, when I went to pick up the cake today, the lady at the particular retail establishment where I was, I said, thank you so much. The cake looks beautiful, had the lavender icing and the purple bows. And she said, what to me? She said, I'm a survivor. And she didn't know me from Adam, and I explained about the event we had going on today and the work that I was doing, and she said, thank you so much for just doing what you do. So we never know when we're going to cross paths with someone, and once you kind of open that door for people, they feel a sense of comfort at being able to finally be able to talk about it, because it might not have been safe to do that in the past, and they see you as an ally and able to do that. So thank you for that. There'll be an opportunity as we speak. There are going to be some things I'm going to scribe for us, just some things I want to make sure that you take away today. You'll also have an opportunity to ask some questions yourself. We'll have some index cards for you. You'll be able to write some questions down and get those asked as well. But Ms. Shine, what do you know now that you wish you had known then prior to writing the book? You talked a little bit about that, but what do you know now that you wish you had known then prior to writing the book?
Well, what I wish I would have known then, what I know now prior to writing the book. I wish I would have known the signs of domestic violence and what they really look like. I realized that I did not know as much about domestic violence as I thought I did. And what I'm learning is the silence. But one thing, as I'm pondering on this question, going within, something that I have found since I've been doing this work is, even with me, writing the book, what I found was shadow work. What I found was dealing with the dark night of the soul. We have to deal with those unhealed parts of us. Understanding that, and I talk about this in the book, unhealed childhood injuries are one of the biggest threats to our society. And so we tend to, if we don't get that healing done, it's just a repeated cycle. And what I found out when writing the book, I had left out that first chapter, and it was about my family. And I didn't want to talk about my family, but I did. Someone had told me, said, oh no, I had completely written the book. And I left that whole chapter out, and that was like the key to the whole book as to how Cheryl got here. Because I suffered from the same conditions Cheryl suffered from, and that was that unconditional love. And she was seeking that from everyone. It didn't have to be a man. It didn't have to be, she was seeking that from friends, families, a man. And if I could go back in time, what I know now, I would have helped her through that. Because writing the book and her death helped me with my unconditional love. And, that was her biggest thing. She needed that unconditional love that she never got healed from. And she went to her grave seeking that. So it's those unhealed childhood injuries. And doing that shadow work and facing that, the dark night of the soul. You got to do it.
Thank you so much for answering that question with such candor and such care and honesty. There is something that you wrote in the book that I also wanted to ask you that's similar to that. You wrote about the stigma of shame and embarrassment fear versus rational thinking. What do you think those emotions signify for you and for survivors? And you alluded to that some where you were talking about the unhealed places. And when we do domestic violence work, we talk about the cycle of violence. What that looks like, how things start out in a honeymoon stage. It looks real cute in the beginning, and then that tension builds, and then we have the explosion, and then we go right back, and that pattern of learned behavior goes around and around and around until we can get an interruption in that. But can you talk some about those emotions and what that signifies for you and what it might signify for survivors?
Okay. Far as me, I never really thought about domestic violence until it happened to my sister. But when it happened to her, I took to social media because I felt like with her, there was a lot of shame, guilt. She even would shun her family off, shun me off, shun my sister off, her co-workers off. When I wrote the book, I had to go deep and do a lot of research with different people, news articles, things like that. But anyway, from hearing from her friends, family members, and things like that, and also me personally dealing with her, she had a lot of shame and she had a lot of guilt. She had a lot of pride. She did not want anybody to know that she was going through this. But I will tell you one thing. If you don't disclose or do something different, it will show up. You can hide it all you want, but it will show up. And what I found sitting around tables with survivors, not only just from me posting to social media. I'm very active in our community. I've been with Family Services Advocacy Group, and initially I didn't know how I fit into the arena because I wasn't technically a domestic violence victim, but Cheryl's voice has resonated with so many and has given a voice to many women. And still this day, what I have found out is women that have even been survivors, which include, and my sister-in-law is okay with this because she shared her story last year with an agency. She had been out of a domestic violence situation for 20 years, but it took her, Cheryl's voice, she began to talk about it. So sitting around, and I still find women afraid to talk about it, but they are beginning to use their voice and open their mouth and say, I've been in this. And I think the biggest key to this are survivors, because they're going to help liberate the victims, because it is through our voices and stories that we can help inspire victims to become survivors. So I want survivors to know this is a key. You guys are a key to the freedom for victims.
So let's dig a little bit deeper. It's really hard if you're on the outside looking in to try to wrap your head around why would somebody stay in a relationship that is physically abusive, which is dangerous to your mind, body, and spirit, and not leave that relationship. We know that the most dangerous time for survivors or for victims is when they are planning to leave, or they've recently left, or they're in the moment in the process of healing. More women and children are killed during those times than any other time. But there also, we want to bear witness to the very realities for why people stay. There are internal reasons, like you talked about, like pride, fear, shame, guilt, embarrassment, religious beliefs, cultural traditions, norms, and mores. But there are also some very practical reasons that bear out that we need to do better on as a community to figure out how we can help people survive after a domestic violence situation if they choose to leave that. Practical things like affordable childcare, transportation, safe and affordable housing, how our systems do and don't enmesh together to help. That's why we have a family justice center, so that prosecutors and law enforcement and advocates and healthcare providers can work together to wrap around our survivors and help them get to those next steps that are so important. So it's really important that we understand there are very practical reasons why people stay in relationships that feel to us on the outside that just don't make any sense. But when someone says that they love you, that's a very powerful hook to keep us tethered to other people, to our families, to our children, to our communities. One other thing I wanted to ask you, as nurturers and caregivers and helpers, not solely women, but mostly women, about 85% of domestic violence happens with men as the perpetrators, women as the victims, but we don't want to miss that it also happens in same-sex relationships, and it happens with women as perpetrators and men as the victims as well. But what is important for women to learn about their own power?
First of all, not to forget about themselves, because we can get caught up. I mean, even with my husband, I can get caught up with busy helping him do this or that, running the household, and we forget about ourselves because we tend to be nurturers and things like that. And as two come together, you still are one separately having your own thing. So I would say don't forget about yourself, because you are worth it. I've done speeches and I tell the audience before we get started, say, I am worth it. Hold the mirror up to your face and say, I am worth it. I am more than enough. And just always remember that you are powerful. You are valued. Take time out for yourself. Don't give all your all to someone and leave yourself out. Because, like they say, you have to put on your oxygen mask first. So, but women, we do carry a lot of roles. In today's society, we're working outside the household, and a lot of women are entrepreneurs. They're running their own businesses, and they're doing great things in the world, and still have to come home and take care of the household as well and do things. So just don't forget about you. Walk in your power.
I love that. Walk in your power. I think I can take that away and use that. Walk in your power. I love the fact that we have men here in the room today, and that is so important to have men in the conversation about this issue. When we start talking about power and control and misogyny, and we talk about equal pay for equal work, and we talk about all of these things that matter to everyone, and when we exhibit those things in a society and in a community, it benefits everybody. It benefits all of us when people get paid equally for their work. So some of those underlying foundations, we need to speak to those, but we're glad that we have men in here today. But what are your thoughts on how we bring men into the conversation and reflect that all gender identities, LGBTQIA, can be victims and perpetrators of violence? but how does everybody being at the table help victims heal and get what they need?
Okay. First of all, we know that there is a movement going on right now to not be silenced, period, in anything that you find to be injustice. So we know that, well, since my sister was killed in 2014, and I feel like that movement started. And it may have started before, but I'm just more aware of it because I started speaking about the silence. And women, like I said, survivors are the key. And I've dealt with more women than men, and I've had a couple of men I can count on one hand that have shared with me privately that they were in a domestic violence situation. So the more women speak out, and the more we have to get men to understand that it's okay to say, I'm being harmed, to get men to come to the table, because men tend to be macho. They don't want to know that a woman beat on them or whatever, or disrespect them, because it's a society thing that we have been told that men are supposed to be but they have feelings just like we do. So first of all, breaking that silence, just sounding the silence in domestic violence, period. And the more people talk about it, take the stigma and the judgment off of it, the more our community as a whole can heal. And going back to our shadow work and dealing with the dark night of the soul. But we must break the silence, first of all, as the women, in order to invite the men to the table, or the LG, because LGBTQI. I'm sorry, no disrespect. To bring everybody to the table, and that it is okay to sit at this table. Also, when I was doing the advocacy group at Family Justice Center, they were speaking on bringing men to the table. But then the pandemic hit. So we're going to be starting back the advocacy group at Family Services here soon. So we want to welcome men in the LGBTQIA+ community.
Thank you. I think the other thing about traditionally, we have seen in our society men in power who have been the decision makers, who are the ones at the heads of corporations, and we're starting to see a shift in that women are in the workplace and who are leading companies, who are involved in science, technology, engineering, and math. And the more opportunities open up for women in those areas, they are in a position to reclaim power. But we know that men have sisters, right? They have wives and daughters and nieces and granddaughters. And if we think that these things are not happening to our sisters and daughters and nieces, then we are mistaken. And so we need to make sure that everyone is at the table, because this happens to everyone. Domestic violence cuts across all races, genders, socioeconomic groups, regardless of the profession you're in, how much money you make, whether you have an education or not. So we have to be, when we're talking about this, we're talking about the topic in a way that it affects everyone. So thank you for answering that. In your book, Cassandra, you talked about flashing yellow lights. And we know when it comes to traffic that there are red lights, which mean stop. There are yellow lights, which mean proceed with caution. And there are green lights that mean go. And it really struck me in your book. You were talking about flashing yellow lights. But often when we talk about domestic violence, we skip to the red flags. What are the red flags? What are the things we need to look out for? But there was something about those flashing yellow lights that really was important to me. And I'd like to hear you talk about that and what that means, flashing yellow lights.
Do you have that marked in the book?
I do.
Could you read that?
Give me just a minute.
I think I know what part you're talking about.
Page 47.
Yes. Let me read it out. Speaking of flashing yellow lights, as I look in hindsight, there were so many red flags at the beginning of the relationship. Very early warning signs that signaled danger was ahead. Mumbled beware and screamed take precaution was the voice in my head, tingling in my spirit, and the knot in my gut. I felt from the depth of my soul daily, more oftentimes than not, as my relationship progressed on with him. It was like I was trapped in a soundproof glass box, silently screaming out loud for help and waving my hands. Everyone could see me, but they could not hear me. So I think from that, when we talk about flashing yellow lights as opposed to the red flags, what do we need to know? What do you think she might have wanted to know or point out before we got to the red flags?
Okay. Some things were flashing yellow lights for me as far as her relationship. And not to be judgmental or anything like that, but when you get up in a certain age, as you read that, or as you read the question, I was thinking of something else. I can recall when I was writing the book and doing my research. My sister met this man at my cousin's birthday party, and one of the flashing yellow lights were quite a few people told her not to get with him. He was not a good guy for her. Another flashing red light was he was 10 years older than her, which that's not really a flashing red light, but he was a 50-year-old man. He didn't have a job. He just got out of prison not too long ago. And as she dug, there was more not good family history. So he had a criminal record, and she found this out later, but he had assault on 4 females. I mean, not 4, he had 4 assaults. I don't know if they were different females. So, but financially, he didn't have a job. He moved in really quickly with her. She did help him find a job. From my perspective, in my opinion, I don't feel like a woman should have to help a man financially bring himself up. I mean, there's different working together, but you come to the table with nothing to offer. And then just me meeting him, I didn't get a good feel about him, but those are the yellow lights. You know, she took him home that night. She met him at the party. You know, she took him to his mama's house. So, you know, to me, all those are yellow, flashing red lights. And then I don't know when the disrespect, but I've heard him curse her out before and things like that. And family members witness, friends have witnessed. So it was things like that, that counting your gut, no one has to tell you. It's that gut feeling that you get. No one has to tell you. It's instinct.
I really like what you said about listening to your gut and instinct, because oftentimes we don't pay attention to those flashing yellow lights, and before we know it, they're red flags. So I think that's really important, and we have young people in here today that one day they're going to be dating, and they're going to be looking to have relationships, and we want to make sure that we're having conversations not just about the caution lights, the yellow lights, and the red flags, but also help people define what is a healthy relationship. What does that even look like? We have reality TV. We have all of these things that pull at us from social media. And a lot of times we haven't taken the time to figure out what constitutes a healthy relationship. And if we're not having those conversations first, a lot of times we get to them after we've already had a difficult situation happen to us. So I just challenge all of us to have conversations with our young people in whatever ways, whether it's in our families, in our athletic groups, in our cheerleading groups, wherever we're connected to young people, to have conversations about what healthy looks like. Because once we know what healthy looks like, when these other things are happening, then we will stop and we'll listen to that instinct, I think, a lot better. So thank you for that.
And I just wanted to be clear, I'm not judging anyone for being in prison, because every day people rehab and do great things in lives. What I was saying was sometimes people have no desire to rehab, and sometimes it falls back on that unhealed childhood injuries, and he had quite a few.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's really important, because oftentimes we do come into relationships as two unhealed people coming together. And we have to do our work, like you said, individually and collectively, as individually as two separate people, and sometimes we can work on that together. So thank you for that clarification. One final question I have for you, and then we'll be able to have questions from the group. You were involved on the steering committee with the planning of Bridges to Hope Family Justice Center for Forsyth County several years ago, and you had an opportunity to come visit the center. And I wanted to ask you, how does it feel to know you are a part of that planning and that it's now a reality? And what is the importance of having a place like Bridges to Hope Family Justice Center in a community? I mean, we can talk about the data and what it says about reducing homicides and those kind of things. The Department of Justice recognizes a family justice center as a best practice in a community. But what I want to hear is, what does that feel like for you, coming from this experience, being part of the planning, and now seeing it be in reality for our community?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say that I was honored and humbled to serve on the steering committee for the Family Justice Center back in 17, 18, 19. And how I came to serve on the committee was through the advocacy group at Family Services. Someone had gave my name, two people had gave my name to recommended me to serve. And I was kind of like a voice for the survivors of the advocacy group, because what better way to represent this group, because they are the ones that have been through domestic violence. And so it was really important that that group was represented, to have a voice, because you don't want someone to make all the decisions that have not had the experience with domestic violence, actually have truly gone through it. And of course, it has been people that were serving on the steering committee have gone through it, not all, but You want that voice for those people to help facilitate a more smoother operation. What I think Family Services, Family Justice Center in our community, I wish this had existed before my sister's death. Because when you have those people that are connectors in our communities, those are some awesome people. And that is what the Family Justice Center rep. It connects the victim and all the many resources and services available to them. They're like the connector for these victims. And it is a place where they can come without judgment. They can get all these wonderful, great services provided. And it's also like a safe place because they don't have to run all over to this agency, that agency. And you just never know, their abuser could be following them. And one of the great things I like about it is that they can file their restraining order there, because my sister was killed on the day that she took out her restraining order. So also DeWanna, she is the director there, and she just has such a great, kind, sweet spirit. And victims need that when they're coming out of a trauma situation. They need that non-judgment, that peace, like, it's okay, I got you. Also, something that the survivors of advocacy group, we got to plan in the painting of the walls. We want something serene. So we got to participate in a lot of things. It wasn't just my voice or someone else's voice. The whole group got to participate in several things that went on. Also, what I found was amazing was all these groups and all these people coming together, planning this. It was a huge overtaking. It was a huge task. And what I found amazing was they would take these stickers and like the little sticky notes, but they were like bigger stickies, and they would just stick them on the wall and break them down by subjects. And I'm just looking at all these colors and all this stuff on the wall, like, how in the world are we gonna get this thing started? But we all came together and it got done. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see all of it come together. And Family Justice Center is going to be, it already is, but it is going to be a great thing in our community where victims can come and feel safe. And that's about it.
Thank you, Cassandra. I just want to mention, just for clarification, for some of you who don't know what Bridges to Hope is, we have community partners that are there on-site and off-site. We have the Children's Law Center and the District Attorney's Office and the Parenting Path and all 3 law enforcement agencies. We have family services. We have legal aid. We connect people to child support and different services from the Department of Social Services and Public Health. I mean, there are so many opportunities for people to connect, because if you've ever gotten caught in a phone tree between a service provider and you're just trying to get to the right person, well, we can facilitate that and make it easier, quicker, faster, more efficient. We also are able to make sure that we're triaging high-risk cases immediately on site when there's a need for that, to talk about safety planning and reduce that risk, potential for homicide. One of my dreams is at some point is to have some sort of health care service on site, because people are embarrassed. They don't want to go even to their own doctor and have to disclose domestic violence, somebody they might have known for decades. So my goal one day is to have health care on site and to have some other things that people, when they make that step out of the crisis area, to be able to think about home ownership and increasing their education and doing things that give them a brighter future that's self-sufficient and independent of that abuser. So thank you for being a part of the planning process, because I certainly couldn't do what I'm doing without the feedback from survivors that we get on a regular basis, so that we know that we're either on track, and if we're off track, you're very quick to tell us. So I appreciate that.
Yes, and I mean, I just thought that was really great that they considered the voices of survivors that had already been through the domestic violence situation. So you got to give Family Service a huge applaud for even considering the voices of survivors.
Yes, the Voices group is something that across the nation and across the world, where there are family justice centers in communities, there are what we call Voices survivors groups that give regular feedback to local communities and even at the state and national level, so that as decisions are being made legislatively, as decisions are being made for funding, as decisions are being made about what kinds of services to have in centers and communities, that family justice centers are listening to that feedback, and it's kind of a 360 to go right back in there. We also thank the county, Forsyth County, for recognizing that this is something that they could take leadership on and make this happen. Sometimes, as you were saying, how in the world do you get a bunch of people together in a room and then at the end you have the result of an actual center and it's up and running? So I appreciate Forsyth County government for being instrumental in making that happen and helping us do that day to day. Ms. Bolden has some index cards, if any, or some sticky notes. If you have some questions for Ms. Shine and you would like to jot those down, we'll certainly open to you asking questions. If you have questions for her, if you have questions about her process in writing the book, because many of you may have a story you want to tell as well. If there are questions that you have about some of the services that are available in this community. We heard about Family Services being a domestic violence service provider. We also have Next Step Ministries in Kernersville. We also have Eliza's Helping Hands in Forsyth County, and they all contribute in different ways to what we're doing. So we want to make sure that people are informed and know about what's available in their community. So if you have questions, we'll be able to take those. But also, before we move into that, I do want to recognize our elected district attorney, Mr. Jim O'Neill, has joined us this afternoon. If you'll just wave your hand, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. So, Ms. Shine, how has this experience been for you talking about this today? I know we've been planning this and working on it for a couple of months. How has this experience been for you?
I think it's wonderful because, like I said, my thing has been sound the silence in domestic violence, but sounding that silence, because the more we get out here in our community and let people know it's okay, take that shame and that stigma. It's kind of like someone has a secret and they say, oh, I'm gonna tell it. I'm gonna tell it. And then you're like, you tell it your own self and it takes the momentum off of it. It's not a big deal anymore because you told it your own self. So that's what survivors and victims must do. That was one of the things that kind of bothered me when I first started finding out about domestic violence, was the silence, and people wanted to be silenced, afraid of being killed. But either way, you can be killed, and I talk about it in that book. You have to know when to roll, when to fold them, know when to run. Kenny Rogers. So I think this is great. We're having the library is closed on a Sunday. Come on now, that is awesome that we're having this open dialogue about domestic violence in our community, and it's a wonderful thing. I feel great about it. And I wrote this book 2 years ago during the pandemic, and a lot of people was asking when you're going to have a book signing. Sold a lot of books online, but this live book signing and getting to really have this open dialogue is like, it's a game changer. It's a game changer in our community, and it's a movement. It's a movement. So I see the changes coming. I can envision that people are going to like start talking about it more, and we can get rid of domestic violence in our communities.
Ms. Bolden, if you want to bring the questions. So one of the questions is, you said you speak first person in the book. So are the events based on conversations you had with your sister, and how much did you know before her death? One of the things that really struck me about this book was that it's part workbook, it's part journal, it's part affirmation. The way the book is written is so unique. So I hope that today you're able to purchase the book. There are also books that the library has purchased that you can check out as well. But I found how it was written was really unique, that it's in first person past. But the question is, are the events on actual conversations, or, and this is part of your process in writing the book that I happen to know, but share a little bit about that and how you felt Cheryl's voice come to you as you were writing the book.
Okay. You want me to answer her question first? Or?
Yes.
Like I said, I did a lot of research, and some of the events were based on our conversations, friends' conversations, her daughter conversation, her son conversation, co-workers conversation, news articles, police reports. I mean, I have a bag with like this much information. So it took me 9 months to write the book. So I really dug deep. The police department would not give me they only gave me the public because they felt like once the case, also I wrote it from, I am a nurse by profession, and we went to several hearings. So after the hearing was over, it was time to write the book. So basically, 2018, I really follow my spirit. I'm very spirit guided, and I also believe that Cheryl guides me. I have a spiritual team I call, and Cheryl is the leader. I have a small organization called Sound the Silence in Domestic Violence. She guides that organization. She's a guardian angel over that organization. The funny thing is, 2018, I was told to go on a fast in December. And I hate when the spirit does that to me because I hate going on a fast. So I went on a fast the beginning of January. I broke my foot. And we have steps everywhere, from the front door to the back door. We have 3 levels. So I could not do anything. So it was like, you're going to go on a fast and you can't do anything anyway. So you're going to write. And this is before the case was closed. The Spirit told me to start blogging. So I started blogging because it had been almost 5 years. So when I follow my spirit, I don't understand why, but it's planting some seeds that's going to blossom and that's going to have a purpose. So that's what happened. And once I started blogging, they called me, like, I think it was about my third or fourth blog, because we hadn't heard anything from the court system. And they said, we're going to close the court. We're going to close the case. And they closed the case on May 17th, which was my anniversary. And we usually go somewhere, and we didn't plan anything that year for whatever reason. But anyway, all of that fell into place, and that's when the Spirit said, now it's time to start writing the book. It took me 9 months to write this book. And so what was important with this book was everyone has a story. But you don't want to just give people a problem and don't give them a solution. So with this book, it said, tell Cheryl's story with an experience in each little section. I think it has about 7 chapters. Tell her experience, then give a reflection. It's kind of like Shirley saying, okay, and tell it from a point where the victim can hear her, can feel her, can feel her emotions. Because it is a very tragic and sad story. But she wanted her voice to convey, like, don't be me. You can survive domestic violence. So then she gives a reflection after each experience. There is domestic violence awareness. Domestic violence awareness. So that's like facts in the book. And then there's questions to ponder. And I think that's really important because that's kind of like shadow work or facing the dark night of the soul. And also, this book is mainly, the Spirit was telling me to speak to the victim. And so the victim may not feel comfortable going somewhere to get help. This book can help them do some shadow work. This book can reflect on something that they may be going through. They may not feel comfortable talking to someone. I also did affirmations. I thought that was real important to empower that victim to say, I am strong, I am worthy, I am. So I am valuable. Each little section with the questions, with the reflections, with the affirmation, they all align with the subject that she was talking about at that time. So that was why I wrote the book that way. So to inspire women and men to, you can be free. I think at close to the end of the chapter, she said something like, if you made it this far, then you are a survivor. So she's speaking life into women and men that may feel hopeless and that they can't get out the situation, but they can.
It's really personalized because you use first person, and it every time I read it, it does feel like she is there with you, just tapping you on the shoulder and encouraging, inspiring you, and motivating you to keep going. Thank you for sharing your process with that. In the interest of time, I have 2 questions here I want to make sure that we get to, because we want to give plenty of time for you to visit with her as she's signing your books. How do we help those in this situation that may not be ready to walk away? I want both of us to work on that piece. a lot of times people don't know what to say. And there's some key phrases that we can all kind of just, they're bullet points we can put in our back pocket and just keep there for us. One of those is nobody deserves to be abused. We want to make sure people really get that deep in their heart that there is no reason for anyone to justify abusing another person. So you don't deserve to be abused. I'm sorry this happened to you. And that states, first of all, that we are connecting empathetically with someone, but also acknowledging and valuing what someone's experience has been. We're validating that it did happen. And a lot of times people don't come forward because they think they won't be believed. You don't deserve this. I'm sorry this happened to you. There are resources available in our community. You may not know what they are, but letting people know that there is help gives them hope. And there's actually something about the science of hope during the planning of the center that we learned about, that there's actually a science to hope. And helping people feel hopeful is really important as well. And then we can ask, what do you need? How can I assist you? Is there something I can do for you? They may want you to hold their hand. They may say, can you hold my hand while I make this phone call? But just those key phrases mean a lot to people when they don't know what to do. But, again, you don't deserve this. I'm sorry this happened to you. How can I help you? And just affirming that you believe them. Saying, I believe you, is really powerful, because the abuser has punished the victim for speaking out, has punished them for talking about it, has punished them or will punish them for letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak. So we want to do that safely. We want people to be safe coming forward, and that's an important part of disclosure too, is making sure that there's a safety plan for when they do decide they want to talk about it, that we honor people's confidentiality and their privacy when they do come forward. That's a really important part of the work that people do. But from your perspective, what are some ways that people can talk when they're not ready to walk away? And remember, the goal is not always leaving that relationship. For some people in the moment, it may be safer to stay, and it's not quite time for them to leave. Some people, it takes an average of 7 to 10 attempts before they can leave. So today, they may not leave, but 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, they may be ready. But we planted that seed today for letting them know that there's a safe way to do that. What do you think is important in that?
Well, a lot of times women, I know I say women a lot, and that's because I speak to women a lot. That a lot of times they're afraid to walk away because they've already been paralyzed with fear. And so one way, if they feel confident talking to you, is not to pass judgment. Give them some encouragement. Because what I heard when I first started doing domestic violence or understanding domestic violence was, it has to be that woman's decision. At the end of the day, it still has to be her decision to walk away. But you can be lend a ear, lend a hand, whatever they need, because a lot of times it is fear that has paralyzed them. So, and give them the book.
Good answer. I like it. I like it. We don't want to hold things up much longer because we want you to get some of that pretty cake with the lavender icing. And we also want you to have an opportunity to talk to Cassandra and purchase your book and get it signed. There was one final question: in what ways can we support this work as citizens in this community? I could go on with that for quite some time. One of the ways that you can do that is just supporting people individually. That's really important, people you know in this work. If you know of an agency or somebody that's doing this work, or organizations like Sound the Silence or the Family Justice Center or Battered Women's Shelters, find out how you can volunteer. Find out how you can learn more. Find out how you can support in donations. We're always looking for groups that can support the center with some of the gaps that we may have. All organizations are looking for that, so that's really important as well. I think when it comes times for decisions to be made, to let your voice be heard, I think that's really important as a part of a community and a process. This is United Way giving time right now, and there are a lot of organizations and agencies that are part of the Family Justice Center, but also doing all kinds of community work. So when United Way and other funders are doing things, that's a good way to give back. But one of the most important things that doesn't cost anything is to hold a hand and put a hand on a shoulder and let people know that you're present, that you believe them, that you're validating and valuing what they said. And so that's that individual piece. And then there's the higher level, of course, working with organizations. And I think most organizations will not turn you away if there's something that you want to do or a way you want to give back.
I think a great thing is something that Sound the Silence has done is come out and support. Like my niece and I, we're artists, creative, and we have done things that's kind of like a healing process. Doing arts and different things like that to help maybe families that's going through grieving, or survivors or victims that are we've made earrings and paint, things like that, because that brightens their spirit. I always say creativity is the language of the universe. So we have gone to the women's shelter and just have done different things, a vision board with the women there. And we do it through the organization. So giving money to different organizations, things like that, can help do things like that in the community. My husband is looking like, what are you talking about?
Well, Cassandra Bethea Shine, thank you for sharing with us today, for being willing to give of your time and the things that you do in the community through your organization, Sound the Silence and Domestic Violence, for writing your book, for sharing your heartfelt thoughts and emotions with us today, for how you've supported just the work in this community, so many organizations. I know it's not been easy as part of your healing journey, but we thank you for being transparent with us today. Thank you all for being here, for being present, for witnessing and listening today. Miss Cassandra, if you'd like to go to your table and get set up. Miss Bolden, if you would direct people for how you would like them to do that, then we will take your direction on getting books and getting them signed.
I wanted to say, men, this book, I didn't think about it a few years back, but this book is a great book to get for your daughters. Great book to get for your daughters. So I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Ms. Foley. Thank you again, DeWanna and Ms. Shine. This was excellent. So thank you for taking the time out today to help us present this program. So for any of you all who plan to purchase a book, I have some notes, basically post-its. If you could go ahead and write what you would like to have Ms. Shine to sign, your name, or any message, I'll give that to you. That just sort of helps the process along. Then we also have some light refreshments for you back. We have some,
Will there be a book two? Will there be another book coming?
Is there, that was one of my questions. Are you writing a sequel?
I don't know if I want to write a sequel to necessarily that, but I may write something. What I find too is I found people in the same situation I was in, and they don't want to talk about it either. And they've been dealing with grieving of their family member for years. So that's something I want to just help families with grieving processing. And I might write something about dealing with the dark night of the soul or doing your shadow work, because I think that is the first process to healing and dealing with those unhealed childhood traumas. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you all.